Greetings, fellow gamers. I'm the Soulsborne Seeker, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but today I'll be reviewing Hollow Knight Silksong, the long-awaited metroidvania sequel to the original Hollow Knight, developed by Team Cherry and released on the 4th of September 2025 for PC, PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch 2, Xbox One, as well as the Xbox Series X and Series S. It's no secret that Silksong had become something of a legend in the metroidvania community prior to its release, both because of the incredible quality of its predecessor, which single-handedly brought about a new era for the genre and raised expectations for the new entry, but also due to its incredibly long development cycle which, in combination with Team Cherry's radio silence for more than half a decade, eventually led people to believe that the game would never be released. With Silksong finally in our hands and expectations soaring, the two questions that remain are: first, was the wait worth it? And second, was Team Cherry able to recapture the magic that made the first Hollow Knight such a beloved title? Well, let's find out. Silksong transpires after the events of the first game and places us in the role of Hornet, the princess protector of Hallownest, who is kidnapped by a group of strange, veiled bugs and taken to the vast, fallen kingdom of Pharloom, a realm plagued by a strange malady that has turned most of its insectoid denizens feral. After managing to escape her captors, Hornet embarks on a perilous journey to reach the kingdom's peak in order to confront the dark force behind this affliction, all the while learning about the world's tragic history during her ascent. Silksong can be quite cryptic with the delivery of its story, which is mostly conveyed via environmental storytelling, ancient texts, and nuanced discussions with Pharloom's population, though I will admit that it is easier to understand than that of the first Hollow Knight, something that I mainly attribute to the fact that Hornet actually speaks, which provides a glimpse into her thoughts. I have to say I really enjoyed that change in character approach when compared to the prequel, since it not only helped me get a better grasp of Hornet's ordeal and the dangers plaguing the setting, but also because it allowed me to empathize with her as it gave me deeper insights into her personality and motivations. Speaking about setting, I have to give Team Cherry props for once again managing to present us with a meticulously handcrafted world to explore, which is brought to life by a sublimely phenomenal art style. The kingdom of Pharloom is incredibly sprawling and ingeniously interconnected, making it a land ripe for exploration. From mossy grottos to lava-scorched caverns and rain-battered moors, all the way to cogwork chambers and frost-plagued mountains, the biomes you'll get to traverse are unique and expansive, each and every one of them brimming with detail, lore, ambience, and personality that essentially makes them their very own characters in the story. To top it all off, the experience is further enhanced by Christopher Larkin's haunting music, who once more does a phenomenal job of delivering some memorable tunes, though I'll admit that it didn't manage to surpass the first title's soundtrack, many of whose melodies are still stuck in my head to this day. In terms of exploration, this is one of those games where I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to venture off the beaten path and find collectibles, since you're going to need every ounce of help you can get in order to brave its challenges, something I will speak more extensively on when addressing its difficulty. Pharloom is a huge realm to explore and, accordingly, packed to the brim with a ridiculous amount of secrets and optional valuables to uncover. The game's discoverables are mainly divided into 8 categories, those being mask and spool fragments, quest items, crests, skills, tools, fleas, consumables, as well as shards and rosary beads. Mask and spool fragments are responsible for increasing your health and silk pool respectively, with 4 mask fragments granting an additional hit point to your collection and 2 spool pieces extending your silk reserves by a thread, with silk being the equivalent of magic energy that is used to heal yourself as well as perform powerful attacks, both of which I will address in the combat section. Quest items refer to special collectibles that correspond to the completion of wishes provided either by NPCs or by wish boards in exchange for rewards, with the term wish here being a stand-in for side quest. Crests are equipables that unlock different modes of attack, with each one offering a unique way of taking down enemies, for example using claw-like assaults to slash at your foes or sword-like attacks to slice at them. Skills are magical abilities of which you can have one equipped at any given moment, allowing for a burst of offensive power at the cost of silk. Tools are items that can be inserted on your equipped crest in order to provide special benefits, such as using ranged attacks with a variety of secondary weapons, applying poison to enemies, as well as increasing your attack and speed momentarily, and are essentially the first game's equivalent to charms. Fleas are adorable creatures that you must locate and rescue, similarly to Hollow Knight's grubs, and are part of a long quest line involving a flea caravan. Shards and rosary beads beads correspond to the game's 2 currencies, with shards being necessary to restock some of your secondary weapon reserves and rosary beads required in order to barter with the numerous merchants of Pharloom for their prized wares. Finally, consumables refer to a variety of different one-use items you will find that yield some sort of benefit before disappearing from your inventory, such as rosary strings that give a fixed number of beads and shard stones that do the same for shards. Staying a bit on exploration, I do need to inform you that if you weren't a fan of the original game's map system, things have largely remained the same here, so consider yourselves forewarned. In essence, the map overview of any given biome is unavailable to you until you meet a special merchant from whom you can purchase the area's map for a fee. This allows you to see an outline of the biome, but in order to fill out said outline, you'll have to rest at a bench, at which point the map will reveal the area rooms you have visited up until then. The aforementioned merchant will also sell you special markers, a few of which will automatically pinpoint fast travel and merchant locations, while the rest can be placed manually wherever you want on the map, which I highly recommend you do immediately whenever you come across an unreachable area or item, since there is no automatic marking for those. Some maps of latter biomes are not offered by said merchant, but are instead found in specific rooms and once again granted for a fee, so the idea behind them remains the same. I'm actually one of the players that absolutely loves this map system, since I feel like it gives off an air of adventure as you explore the world and then need to take a moment's rest in order to write down your findings, but I do understand that a lot of people dislike it, so I had to point it out. The overall exploration of the setting is strengthened by 2 solid fast travel systems, one of which is pretty much identical to the first game, where you make use of a giant bug to travel through tunnels after you have unlocked their respective traveling points, while the other consists of a system of elevators which you find later on. Now, while there's a bunch of secrets to find, I have to admit I was a bit disappointed that almost all useful items in the game had to be purchased from merchants instead of being rewards for in-depth exploration. To be more specific, the tools, which without a doubt make the difference between life and death here, as I will clarify later on, were mostly available from NPCs in exchange for rosary beads, which kind of took a bite out of the thrill of discovery as opposed to the first game, which had you hunting for charms and notches across Hallownest. Another potentially minor nuisance for some gamers can be the aforementioned wishes, which are the game's side quests. In essence, several of them were fetch quests that needed of you to collect a certain number of items from defeated enemies and then get back to the quest giver, which can turn tedious at times. The reason I mention this is that in order to go for the story's true ending, you need to complete all available wishes, so do keep that in mind. Personally, I really enjoyed the wish system since it felt on point with the dystopian nature of the game's world, with some of those tasks being really fun to tackle, such as the hunts and courier endeavors, but I get that they won't be everyone's cup of tea. When it comes to platforming, it should come as no surprise that Silksong takes a page out of the first game's book in order to deliver some fun and demented acrobatic gauntlets that you will have to overcome, many of which will require critical and creative thinking as well as your undivided attention in order to be conquered, with Hornet's incredibly fluid and tight controls making these segments a frustrating delight as you hectically jump, dash, climb, and pogo off of a variety of hazards and foes on your way to safety. With that being said, I do have a major complaint in relation to platforming and, more specifically, pogoing. Just like countless other players, I consider the first game's pogo mechanic to have been one of the most fun things ever, so you can imagine how baffled I was when I realized that they actually messed that part up in the sequel. More specifically, while the Pale Knight was able to pogo vertically, Hornet does so horizontally, which, believe you me, is one of the worst game design decisions I have ever experienced. While it may not seem like a huge issue at first, the problem of this mechanic rears its ugly head the moment you start having to pogo in relation to platforming, only to realize that doing so horizontally while trying to bounce off of trampoline-like flora is a nightmare. The main issue here is that said flora points are usually clustered together, a formation that doesn't really offer itself for a diagonal approach, which in turn will lead to several failed attempts as you try to straighten yourself in order to reach greater heights. This didn't really feel like something you get used to, and thankfully, it's also something you don't have to suffer for long, since the first crest you will find allows for a downwards pogo, thus making things right again. That being said, you shouldn't need to equip a special item in order to get a basic quality of life move that was there by default in the prequel. Thankfully, said crest also turned out to be one of the best ones, which I kept using throughout my adventure, so the diagonal pogo quickly became a distant memory, but that might not end up being the case for everyone. I understand that Team Cherry wanted wanted to try something different here, but regardless, this felt like a major misstep. Moving on to combat, this is another aspect for which the previous game was praised for extensively, and thankfully, Silksong manages to mostly live up to its potential, though some of the gameplay choices here can be a bit divisive. To start things off, combat is predominantly melee, utilizing Hornet's needle blade in order to eradicate any enemy that crosses her path. On top of that, you have skills at your disposal, which are special abilities of which a single one can be equipped at all times, and which unleash powerful attacks at the cost of your silk, that you then replenish by attacking enemies. Taking it a step further, we have the aforementioned crests, which function as different playstyle approaches to battle, with each one granting unique ways to move as well as take down foes, such as a crest that allows extended blade range and vertical pogoing in exchange for lower attack speed, or another one that has you clawing frantically at enemies and even allowing you to leech health from them, but at the cost of range and a diagonal pogo thrust. That being said, choosing your desired crest entails more than just basic attack forms. You see, as mentioned previously, Silksong features tools, which are special items that bring unique abilities to the table if you decide to equip them, such as coating your weapon with fire for increased damage, adding protection from instant death, as well as providing secondary weapons for more variety in battle approach. Said tools are actually divided into 3 color-coded categories, with the yellow group consisting of more utility-centric abilities like the option to keep a percentage of your currency when you die, the red group bringing secondary weapons into the mix, and the blue group offering unique advantages in combat, such as the ability to coat your secondary weapons with poison or to heal faster. The thing is, the slots where tools can be equipped are on the crests themselves, with each crest featuring not only a different number of slots, but also being specific as to which tool categories can be equipped. For example, one tool may be allowing 6 slots, 2 of which are red, 2 blue and 2 yellow, while another may provide 4 slots, 2 red, 2 yellow and 0 blue. Also of note is that not all slots are immediately available on the crests, some of which need to be unlocked using items called memory lockets. I'll admit it took me a moment to get used to this system, which I initially found limiting when compared to the charm and notches system of the first Hollow Knight, but it eventually grew on me since I did enjoy how it forced me to think tactically when it came to my approach at combat depending on what enemies I was facing, given my restricted options in terms of color types. The one thing I disliked about the crest system was that whenever I would obtain a new crest, the game would automatically equip it on me instead of letting me keep the already equipped one. The problem with this is that while my already equipped crest was adjusted to my style, tools and all, the new crest came empty and with many of its slots locked, forcing me to travel back to the nearest bench in order to change it, since it is only from benches that you can proceed with gear adjustments. Granted, it's not like this is going to be happening frequently given the relatively limited number of crests available to get, which is in the single digits, but it was still needlessly inefficient. On a last note when it comes to combat, Hollow Knight Silksong features corpse runs, which means you have to travel back to your point of death in order to retrieve dropped currency or risk losing it, so if you disliked this about the first game, the second one is not going to do you any favors, and trust me, you are bound to die eventually, especially when facing the bosses plaguing Pharloom. Boss-wise, I'm happy to say that Silksong features some of the most amazing and challenging boss battles I have ever engaged with in the genre. Each and every big bad here felt completely unique, both from a visual design perspective as well as attack patterns, which is truly impressive when considering the insane amount of villains you'll be called to fight here, both story-related and optional. I can safely say there wasn't a single boss fight that bored me, with every clash calling for complete concentration and tactical thinking in order to find the best way to victory. That being said, bosses also give me the ideal segue to address the elephant in the room when it comes to Silksong, and that is its intense difficulty. Silksong is hard, and when I say hard, I mean hit your head against the wall hard. The first few hours give you the impression that this is going to be a manageable adventure, but then there's a sudden difficulty spike that never lets up, and you're going to feel it in your bones, especially with several of the bosses who are going to mop the floor with you a good number of times before you actually triumph against them. Two of the main reasons why the game's difficulty is already getting countless complaints are the following. First, with the exception of enemies in the first couple of biomes, almost every other foe you'll go up against will take 2 points out of your very limited pool of 5 hit points per hit, which can feel quite punishing when paired with the second issue, and that is the fact that health, silk, and damage upgrades are few and far between, especially health, giving you the persistent impression that you remain weak as the enemies grow stronger. I'll admit that I found this somewhat frustrating frustrating at first, until I realized that it was most likely done to force people to make use of their tools in order to survive, which always resulted in a huge sense of achievement once I finally found a smart way to overcome a boss that had killed me 15 times before I got them back. Still, I cannot deny the fact that this is a very hostile challenge level for newcomers to the genre, and feels more tailored toward veterans of the first game, especially since Silksong doesn't have different difficulty options. If you decide to give it a go, be prepared for a lot of pain and struggle, most of which will be pertinent to the various big bads you'll face. That being said, do keep in mind that, as hard as said boss fights are, they're also very well designed and reward keen observation and snappy reflexes, since the vast majority of attacks are appropriately telegraphed, so persevere and you will emerge victorious. Moving on to length, as of the time of this review I'm 30 hours into the game while having achieved 1 out of reportedly 6 endings, defeated every optional boss available to that point, completed every wish I could find, and on my way to the true ending, which will most likely take me another 10 to 15 hours to get. For a price of about $20, Hollow Knight Silksong is, perhaps, the most ridiculously customer-oriented value for money I have ever seen in my life, second only to the first game's price-to-content ratio. In conclusion, I had a wonderfully emotional roller coaster of a ride conquering the challenge that is Hollow Knight Silksong, and cannot wait for what's yet to come. I loved the land of Pharloom and the fantastic visuals that brought it to life. I was thoroughly impressed by the game's musical score, I was hooked by its exploratory aspects, I had a blast dancing through its platforming challenges, and absolutely adored its difficult combat and the way it kept pushing me to get better at the game, especially in relation to the title's fantastic boss fights. That being said, difficulty could have been a bit more gradual and forgiving, exploration definitely had some more room for generosity when it came to health, silk and damage upgrades, some of the wishes could have been a bit more engaging and lore-centric, and finally, the diagonal Pogo should have never been a thing in the first place, at least not a base kit thing. With all that said and done, it's time to answer those 2 questions posed at the start of the review. First, was Hollow Knight Silksong worth the wait? In this reviewer's humble opinion, yes it was. Team Cherry definitely delivered a fantastic adventure while doing their best to add several new things in order to differentiate the experience from Hollow Knight and hopefully surpass it. Now, were they able to do that? No, they weren't. Silksong is an awesome game, but it's not the lightning in a bottle Hollow Knight ended up being. The first game felt more mysterious and exciting in the way it approached exploration and the organic interconnectedness of the setting, had a much more balanced difficulty curve, and for me, the charm and notch system was superior to the crest and tool system. That being said, Silksong is definitely up there with the rest of the greats, and is a no-brainer addition to your metroidvania game library as long as you're okay with the hardship it brings with it. If you're on the prowl for a tough-as-nails challenge that will test your mettle in combat and platforming as it gradually throws one grueling ordeal after the other at you, welcome to Pharloom. If, on the other hand, you're looking for a more casual experience, it's best you seek your fortune elsewhere, because Silksong will test you like few other games. My final verdict on Hollow Knight Silksong is 9.2 out of 10. What are your thoughts on Hollow Knight Silksong? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!